A little while ago I was contacted by Nasum about their A5 Pro. This is a laser engraver and can also cut through certain materials with the right settings. It has a 41 by 40 centimeter bed that you can actually use to the full capacity to engrave on materials. It is compactly packed and needs a little bit of assembly, but luckily is really nicely set up and easy to follow with the steps in the instruction manual. The entire assembly process took about 20 minutes. I then quickly set up a nice workbench downstairs and went to work. Now, since I don't want to ruin my nice new workbench, I did put a piece of sacrificial MDF underneath it so that if it does go through the material and the actual metal plate underneath, that it doesn't ruin my workbench and I can still keep moving forward with the projects safely. Now, it also comes with a couple of scrap pieces that you can use to test out the laser on itself and find which settings it works best with, a little metal plate, and I also decided to buy some evergreen styrene, which I will be using for this project to create some custom nameplates for some of my scale models in my 1/43 scale collection. The metal base plate needs to be put underneath the laser, and you put your projects on top of that to keep it nice and clean and not burn through the table. In order to make it easier for myself to line up the projects, I'd quickly put down a piece of masking tape, drew a couple of lines in Lightburn, that is the software that I'm using to actually operate the machine, turned it on, and therefore it cut out a nice clean line on the tape itself, which then therefore created the zeros, which I can place the material next to so I know where the laser starts. So there are of course many different materials and many ways to use these actual lasers for a ton of projects. One thing I thought that would be pretty cool is to actually create some custom nameplates for your builds. Now in this case I'm just using it on some of my 1/43 scale collection and trying out to create some custom plates for them just to make them look a bit more cool and maybe fit in a bit better in this display case. So what I decided to use was some black styrene from Evergreen. There are many other materials you can use on this, and on the Nasum website there is a list that I showed earlier on which settings to use for certain materials. It is maybe a bit of a trial and error to figure out what works for you. I just went along, tried a couple of things, failed a couple of times, but pretty quickly it worked out really well and I came out with some fine nameplates that I can use on these. I also tried a bigger logo just to see what it was capable of, and that also worked out pretty well. So I'm not going to go really in depth on how the software works. There are many videos online of people who know way more about this than I do, but I simply just know the basics and that seemed to be good enough. Also beware that there does need to be a lot of ventilation in the room as you are creating a lot of fumes you don't really want to breathe in or have hang around all the time, as you're essentially burning material right there. So with the styrene being styrene, it is pretty easy if you just score a line in it. You bend it a couple of times and as you can see right here, it just breaks out really easily and pretty clean along the edges. Now since I engraved in it, there is a deeper section in there and you could just decide to add some paint in it, sand it off and leave it at that. But in this case, since the material that has been burned out has been left with a pretty glossy finish, I figured I would give the top section or top surface a brushed finish by just scuffing it up with a bit of sandpaper and then blowing it out with air to remove all of the dust in the letters and the logo, and have those letters and logos be nice and glossy to give a pretty nice and stealthy badge. Then with a bit of double-sided tape on the back of it, I can simply just apply it to the base of the display itself and have it in place pretty much permanently, but you can also fairly easily remove it if you want to in the future. So I said permanently, but also directly after said that it wasn't permanent, so semi-permanently, but it stays in place nice enough and won't really move if you don't really touch it, and just leaves a super cool badge on it. So for the second model, the BMW, I drew up a similar design, just added a BMW logo and then the script BMW X5, turned on the laser and it went to work on the styrene. On these smaller logos or scripts, it doesn't really take all that long, and this logo took about 40 seconds to complete from start to finish, so you can really pump out a lot of these smaller pieces. The bigger ones obviously take a lot more time, but that has all to be calculated and seen what actually works with what. Now for this second logo, I decided to go a bit more detailed than the first one and just actually add some paint in the lower areas. It doesn't really matter if it's nice and clean or not, because with this next step, after the paint has dried, you're going to be sanding off that top surface, leaving that nice brushed finish, and then cleaning out the inside of the letters, which now have paint in it, with a bit of compressed air, and leaving that paint in there and giving you another super cool logo or script added plate or whatever you want to call it for your models. Now of course that's not the only thing you can do with this. The possibilities are pretty much endless. One of the other things I would like to use this one for in the future is to actually create some custom spacers. With this model having a wide body on it, the stock wheels would not have fit perfectly and nicely into those over fenders, and therefore needed to be extended out a bit. Now for that you could just create some spacers on the inside. Now one of the simple methods you could use for that, it is not really as clean and it does require quite a bit of force, is with a sheet of styrene and some hole punches. You simply just punch a couple of these through the actual styrene and then you just glue them on top of each other and you're finished. Although they can be quite a bit rougher, not all of the hole punches like to go through the material, and it does require quite a bit of force. And with these laser machines you can simply just draw up a circle. If you're capable of drawing up a circle, I certainly am not. As you can clearly see, I just drew up a quick oval, didn't really take all the size into consideration, but just go out, measure your model, measure the size it needs to be, draw up the actual circle to that size in your software. Lightburn is the one that I'm using here, and you can quickly just cut them out on the styrene and repeat it as many times as possible. Quickly just stack them up, glue them together, and space your wheels out the way you want them to be. This is a super nice and clean solution, and it is really quickly done. So I just barely scratched the surface of what this machine is capable of, but I figured this would be a cool project for you guys to see and maybe get you interested in one of these lasers. I will be leaving links in the description down below to the Nasum website if you are interested or want to know more about this specific machine or any of the other machines they offer. So feel free to check those out. If you want to see more projects on laser engraving or have any ideas that I could use this for, please let me know down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.